Good evening and welcome. My name is Sarah Zanaiva Gould. I'm the Executive Director of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. Welcome to tonight's MACRI Talk, Chuco Punk, the Roots and Influence of Punk Rock in El Paso. Tonight we are joined by Dr. Tara Lopez. She is the Assistant Professor of Ethnic Studies at Winona State University in Winona, Minnesota. Her research interests include social and cultural movements, especially among working class communities and communities of color. And she is the author of Chico Punk, Sonic Insurgency in El Paso, which was the recipient of the 2025 Al Lohman Memorial Prize. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, so I want to let people know who are watching tonight that in the chat, please let us know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions for our guests, you can put them in the chat. And at the end of the conversation, we will try to answer your questions. Okay. How can we learn more about this today? Well, I'm going to also put the link to the book in the chat. And then you're going to hear more about it just right now from Dr. Lopez.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And again, thank you for that introduction. Again, my name is Tara Lopez, and I'm very happy to be here today sharing my presentation on my research, Caught in the Crossroads, Punk Rock in 1990s El Paso. But before I start, I do want to again thank MACRI for inviting me. Their very generous invitation honors me quite a lot because they do such great and important work. So thank you. Second, as always, no matter where I'm speaking from or to, I always want to thank the punks in El Paso who have made really this research possible, who shared stories, time, and carefully curated songs, videos, photos, and zines, many of which you're going to see in tonight's presentation. And finally, thank you to the virtual audience that unfortunately I can't see, but I can feel you around. I appreciate you being here with your interest in a topic that is not only intellectually engaging, but it's about a city and a music community that is very close to my heart. So thank you. And tonight we're going to go on a journey of music, in particular punk rock music, in particular something that's much more visceral and expansive, really, than music. And poet and critic Hanif Abdurraqib puts it best when he says, quote, "When music lives in the air, it is one thing. But when you know its undercurrents and ideas that went into a song, you can feel its weight and it becomes more meaningful," unquote. Abdurraqib sends us in the direction of seeking the weight and meaning of music by understanding its political and economic undercurrents and how punk rockers in El Paso used punk culture as a tool to interrogate and challenge such tectonic shifts in their time. So before I get started in the punk revelry, you probably want to know what I've done. Well, to really do any substantive research on this amazing punk rock community, I had to start with what was available, and very little had been written about this community. So I started with the resources that I knew would be most accessible, and that included music journalism and podcasts with the two standout bands, punk bands from El Paso. That's At the Drive-In and the Rhythm Pigs. In addition, I conducted primary source research into utilizing the UTEP Prospector, the El Paso Times, and the El Paso Herald from 1977 to 2002. Now, tonight we're mainly focusing on the 90s, but the entirety of my book, its scope is from the 70s to the early 2000s. And finally, corresponding secondary research, like the works of David Romo, Monica Perales, Yolanda Leva, Mariotti Garcia have written extraordinary secondary history resources for me to scour and others to scour about this wonderful city. But most importantly, I harnessed my punk resources to complete something that was more than a project, but an urgent call to shed light on what I knew was a crucial and creative community. So I started out with what I knew. I put out a call for oral histories on an El Paso punk Facebook group in the fall of 2019. The first person who responded was Ernesto Ibarra, the guy here in his very, very cool sunglasses. And he was a punk I knew from the time when he and his band, the Chinese Love Beads, lived and played in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I grew up. And with his punk faith in me, he vouched for me with other punks, and then those punks vouched with others that I was a trustworthy person to talk to. So really, it was a punk snowball method where I was able to eventually speak with 55 punks, which culminated really with 70 oral histories. So I talked to 55 and re-interviewed many people like Ernesto and Tony here. Most of these oral histories were conducted by phone or by Zoom because, as you can tell, 2019 to 2023, most of that time was during the pandemic. So throughout my research and writing process, these oral histories were in constant dialogue with corresponding primary and secondary research, like with those archives, the newspapers, to deepen really the understanding of this music community. And really, community is the operative term, because all the individuals with whom I spoke, with whom I interviewed, might not have been in bands, but were at every show. And they all mentioned the really essential role of family members, from grandpas to moms to tios, who were really pivotal to the survival and flourishing of this awesome punk culture in El Paso. But it made it bigger and wider in scope. So I needed a wider theoretical lens to understand what was going on. And thankfully, I had one because of the work of Professor Nick Crossley, with whom I worked at the University of Manchester. Inspired by Howard Becker's concept of art worlds, where Becker moves from, instead of just focusing on artists as individual creators of art, he sees art as a form of collective action. So what Crossley really innovatively does for us is that he moves away from seeing music culture as music scenes and develops the term music worlds to emphasize that it's not just the musicians on stages, but networks of roadies, promoters, fans, and others that are integral to the development of any music culture. With this more expansive and inclusive understanding of these communities centered around music, a more nuanced understanding of this punk music world emerged. One where mothers would hide the earnings from a punk show from the cops when they busted the show on the roof of their house. The many kids, especially girls, who booked shows, wrote zines, and were in the audience. It really shedded light on how these individual punks were just as central, whether they're mothers, grandpas, or people in the crowd, to the flourishing of this vibrant music world, just as the ones strumming guitars and beating drums on stage. But punk rock overall really has deep insight. And a key focus of Kirsten Patches, the lead singer of the Madison, Wisconsin-based hardcore punk band Naked Aggression, really sheds light on how politics and social movements and history really were important. In an interview with historian David Pearson, Patches describes how the menace of corporate globalization, the rise of neoliberalism, most potently via the passage of NAFTA in the 90s, were central to punk politics of the era. She reflects, quote, "Everything we had been yelling about in the 90s as a punk rock band, it started to become more of a blatant reality across the world as the 90s progressed," unquote. What I'm going to show you today is that those punk rockers in El Paso were already in the crosshairs of Patch's quote-unquote naked reality by illustrating, one, the firsthand experiences of militarization and violence along the Mexican and American border. Two, how music in El Paso punk reflected Mexican American protest against the injustices of NAFTA and their support for the EZLN, the Zapatistas, and local union collectives like La Mujer Obrera. Three, I'll show you how punk rock culture was, and not only was and is, a vehicle not only to document and reflect on these experiences, but also a crucial medium of protest against the injustices of this pivotal decade. So we'll start with the first part, militarization and violence along the border. In May of 1992, a Border Patrol agent stopped a visually impaired Mexican-American Bowie High School student on his way home from graduation rehearsal in El Paso. When the student invoked his right not to answer the agent's questions and attempted to walk away, the agent threw him up against a fence, roughed him up, spat in his face, and threatened the student with further violence before allowing him to leave. The student eventually contacted the Border Rights Coalition, a local watchdog human rights advocacy group that had already been amassing similar reports of the Border Patrol's abuses throughout El Paso. The student's report became part of a massive federal lawsuit called Murillo versus Musagades against the Border Patrol. The suit was successful in 1982 and forced the Border Patrol to stop racially profiling Mexican Americans, which precipitated an overall reconfiguration of immigration enforcement tactics that we actually see today. The first step in this context was a change of leadership with El Paso native Silvestre Reyes' assumption of the role as chief patrol agent of the El Paso border sector in 1993. Reyes revolutionized Border Patrol's strategy, changing it from one of pursuit to deterrence. This approach became known as Operation Blockade, where the border became a fortress-like complex. San Diego immediately embraced Reyes' strategy under the name Operation Gatekeeper. As a result, it became nearly impossible to cross illegally at specific points like El Paso and Tijuana. Reyes also developed the strategy of Operation Blockade with the help from the Pentagon's Center for Low Intensity Conflict. So it was no surprise that military forces were soon a conspicuous force along with the INS along the international border. In the 1990s, the U.S. Army, National Guard, and Marine Corps participated in 3,000 drug and immigration-related missions along the border, their headquarters located at El Paso's Fort Bliss. Such sweeping changes soon came to the awareness of El Paso punk Lindy Hernandez, pictured here. Lindy was and continues to be a mastermind behind everything, but in particular the mid to late 90s zine, which are independently produced kind of magazines, in particular in the punk culture. And her zine was called Candy from Strangers. And this is a little snippet from one of her zines, where she not only brought her love of punk, but also her political acumen to the fore. In the 1997 edition of Candy from Strangers, she is outraged by the violence exploding along the border. On May 20th, 1997, U.S. citizen and high school student Ezequiel Hernandez was herding goats near Redford, Texas. Marine Clemente Banuelos mistook Ezequiel as a threat because the 18-year-old was supposedly brandishing a rifle to protect his goats. With one shot, Banuelos killed Ezequiel, a murder that did not go unnoticed by Lindy, who has no relation to Ezequiel. In her zine, Lindy is scathing in her column, quote, "The killers of Ezequiel Hernandez went free and no one cares," unquote. She decried the senseless killing of a Mexican-American teenager and was appalled that in the predominantly Mexican El Paso, no one seemed to care at all. She ends with the chilling questions, quote, So do I have a reason for getting worked up about this, or should I assimilate with the rest of society and turn my cheek, unquote. So both the political commentary and her reflection on identity reflect how these young people in El Paso were acutely aware of the increasingly militarized and violent nature along the border, reflecting how this punk music world was touched by these political shifts, but also how this music culture was a vehicle to articulate resistance to such injustices. A form of resistance that was actually kind of fun too. If you look, here's a very serious uh, column on the murder of Ezequiel Hernandez, and then she has Libertad a los presos políticos, which means freedom to political prisoners, and a little punk rock alien. You know, like only punk culture can do this. So these really creative people, young people in El Paso, were not only outraged by violence in other parts of Texas, but also in their twin city of Juarez. So this is the most famous punk rock band, if not most famous band from El Paso, and this is at the drive-in. So right when the breakout El Paso punk band at the drive-in finally landed their first major label contract, they did not forget about the explosion of violence affecting women and girls along the Juarez El Paso border at the time, which is clear in their song and music video Invalid Litter Department. Indeed, from 1993 to 2003, Amnesty International estimated that 370 such femicides took place in Juarez. 75 of the victims were never identified, and that does not touch upon the 600 women that have simply disappeared from Ciudad Juarez and Ciudad Chihuahua in this time period. And despite At the Drive-In's breakout album being recorded in Malibu, California on a major label, the entire song and music video for Invalid Litter Department centers the victims of Juarez. The song and the video focuses on the symbols of activists at the time that were trying to advocate for these women and girls, such as the posters of the victims. So this is one of the posters, and this comes from the music video, but these were classic posters of these disappeared young women and girls. Crosses marking where the victims were last seen, and also pink crosses where their bodies were eventually found, if they were found at all. So let's see for ourselves. With both of these videos I'm going to show you, the music is loud. So you might want to adjust your volume, especially since this is loud punk rock music. And you can still enjoy this music video even without the sound.
Performing on the biggest stage in the world was just one step in my journey. Hi, I'm Ronnie, and I teach people.
Intravenously polite, it was the walkie-talkie that knocked the pins down as her shoes gripped the dirt floor in the silhouette of dying. Dancing on the corpse's ashes. Yeah, they had plans for him, and they had spun the last of the pimps. Polyester satin nail jewelry lips, while the guillotine just laughed again. Dancing on the corpse's corpse's ashes. And the paramedics fell into the wound like a rehired scab at a barehanded plant, an anesthetic penance beneath the hail of contraband. Dancing on the corpse's ashes. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. They had defected and been excommunicated, and all the pulses were subverted. And they made sure that the obituary showed pictures of smokestacks. A vivid dissection that mocked the strut of vivisection, a semi-automatic colony, and a silencing that still watched the streets. With the company of wolves with a stretcher made of cobblestone curfews, as the Federales performed their custodial customs quite well. Dancing on the corpse's ashes. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. Intravenously collided with the walkie-talkie that had knocked the pins down as their shoes lay dangling on the dirt floor in the silhouette of dying. Well, yeah, they had plans for him. They had split the last of the pimps. Polyester satin nailed Dewey to lips while the guillotine just laughed again. And the paramedics had fallen into the wound like a rehired scab at a barehanded plant, an anesthetic penance beneath the hail of contraband. Dancing on the corpse's ashes. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my way there, broken fell into the wishing well, wishing well, wishing well. On my dancing on the corpse's ashes. Jealous hills, young and travel, endless maps made by the scrambles. Jealous hills, nothing travel, endless maps made by the scrambles.
Okay. Well, that's one of my favorite songs, and I never get tired of that music video because it's less of a music video and more of a documentary. And indeed, out of that 6-minute video, the band only appears approximately 50 seconds out of the entire music video. And when they do, as you probably noticed, they're standing near open graves or near the crosses commemorating where the women and girls were last seen. So in live performances, the band did not back down, but even more ferociously defended the victims and excoriated the perpetrators and enablers. At one show, Cedric Bixler-Zavala, this is one of the lead singers pictured here, prefaced the song with the following, and this is for the women who have died in Juarez, Mexico, for anyone who isn't chicken shit enough to bring it up in the press. For you, we sing it loud and we sing your name. And we hope that you do not become part of the invalid litter department. So such vitriol was not exclusive to At the Drive-In and femicides, because there were plenty of changes in the 1990s that their fellow punk rockers in El Paso had in their sights. And that was NAFTA. So on January 1st, 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, was implemented, which not only signaled unprecedented economic and political change, but also inspired the punk politics of the notorious or infamous punk band Revolucion X, with Emiliano Zapata emblazoned on their first album. So this is the cover of their first album. The music was and continues to be a visceral and unapologetic attack, not only on the injustices of NAFTA, but an homage to the bravery of the Zapatistas. Hence, you have Emiliano Zapata on the cover of their first album. Although lacking the notoriety of 90s bands like Green Day and so forth, Revolucion X has a very strong underground following, especially in Latin America. In 2017, an Argentinian podcaster dedicated an entire episode to Revolucion X, obsessing over the first album's political importance and how it typifies, quote, a sound that embodies the three chords played from Latin America, unquote. He also imbues the episode with a heightened tone of intrigue as he refers to Revolucion X as La Banda Fantasma, the ghost band, because supposedly nobody knows who the band members are. But we tonight know who the band members are, or who the mastermind behind Revolucion X is. And it's this fella, Gaspar Orozco. Gaspar Orozco is from La Ciudad de Chihuahua and had been cognizant his entire life of the injustices between, and especially along the border, as he saw people attempting to cross the border from Mexico and into El Paso or into the United States, oftentimes to be met with egregious brutality. By the 1990s, Orozco was a college student at the University of Texas at El Paso, or UTEP. And by that time, he had realized the quote-unquote pure brutal power, unquote, of punk rock and its inherent critique of social injustice. Along with his friend Antonio Martinez, he formed the hardcore punk band Revolucion X and released their first album in January of 1994. So in addition to the first album being EZLN, EZLN, which is the name of the Zapatistas, the first track of the album was also a recording of Comandante Marcos reading off the Zapatista manifesto. What you will see in this clip here is the pure rage of the song EZLN, which is sung entirely in Spanish. The whole album is in Spanish except for one or two tracks. And it's not only an homage to the Zapatistas, but also a critique of neoliberal and establishment Mexican and American politics. So what you're going to see here is, this is a show in El Paso in a garage. And what Gaspar Orozco did with Revolucion X is that when he was in El Paso, he used musicians from El Paso. So the drummer is an El Paso native, Jason Skagen, who is also the archivist. This is he uploads all of these videos of bands. And then when you see the bassist, that is Alex Martinez, who is also a big-time punk rocker from El Paso. And again, this is a show from 1996 in a garage, and we're going to just listen to STLN. There is a lot of feedback, so you probably want to turn it down, but it's exciting not only to see Gaspar singing and so forth, but you're going to see the crowd, and these are going to be typical crowds at these El Paso punk shows.
Yeah, we are Revolución X, and we are from. I don't know.
Okay. So really this really powerful NAFTA-infused politics was not just resigned to these awesome garage shows in 1996, but is also rooted in wider community mobilization in El Paso. So the last example that I'm going to show you is that El Paso had become the United States' largest jean producer and was known as the blue jeans capital of the world. However, once NAFTA came into effect, the results were immediate and devastating. On November 3rd, 1997, for instance, Levi Strauss announced the closure of 3 El Paso plants that employed 1,500 workers, and Wrangler and Lee soon followed suit. The effect on El Paso garment workers, the majority of whom were Mexican-American women, had ruinous impacts that struck the second generation of punks directly, these punks in the 1990s. El Paso punks Ernesto Ibarra, again, I'd show him here. His mother lost her job at this time at Levi's and was relocated. And then their friend, not Tony, but his cousin, Eddie Martinez, who is also in this punk music world, his mother, her job was relocated from Levi's in El Paso to San Antonio after that Levi's plant shut down. Nevertheless, these young punks were connected to long-standing labor organizations to defy these closures. So it's rooted in the deep history of labor activism in El Paso. In the 1970s, Farah was a textile manufacturer like other factories in El Paso that hired predominantly Mexican-American women to work the factory floor under Anglo managers. After going out on strike in 1972 and successfully winning union recognition in 1974, they also continued to be a vital community force by creating the organization La Mujer Obrera. By the mid-1990s, Cecilia Rodriguez, pictured here, continued to be a central leader of La Mujer Obrera, again, this really strong labor coalition. And in addition to that, she also was the U.S. representative to the Zapatistas in the mid-90s and was the mother of El Paso punk rocker Kiko Rodriguez. So the connections are deep. This additional connection fueled the political strain of these punk rockers in the 1990s. So when La Mujer Obrera collaborated with other labor groups to protest women workers losing their jobs, like at factories at Levi's, Kiko Rodriguez's punk band Secondhand Human, along with the hardcore punk band Spitch, and this is Spitch here, were eager to help. The two bands arranged a benefit show under the Bridge of America, so literally they're under an international bridge between El Paso and Juarez, in 96, 97, around there, to raise money for displaced workers. Kiko Rodriguez explains that the benefit shows were important, even if the bands did not entirely understand the gravity of the issues facing these workers. He explained, quote, "We felt good about that day. We felt good about doing something with the scene that could help the local organizations push," unquote. So there you had your crash course in El Paso punk rock. So what does it mean? How do we tie this all together? And how is it significant, especially to the moment in history we are at today? Well, I always find this mural in El Paso of Antonita Tonita Morales in the Duranguito neighborhood of El Paso really poignant and brings everything together. And what the mural says is that una ciudad que olvida su pasado no tiene futuro. So a city that forgets its past has no future. The powerful mural not only sheds light on the power of history, but also the role of seemingly ordinary people like Donita and these young people in El Paso playing punk rock, and the instrumental roles they played in both being disenfranchised by broader political and economic forces, but also demonstrating the really powerful agency that they had in resisting forces and imagining also more just and equitable futures. Nevertheless, when addressing political and social movements, those who are most affected by them are most often the most dismissed and derided as insignificant, even in historical research. In addition to sometimes the disdain of broader society, even those in the halls of academia that I operate in react to what I am researching as cute or hobby research. But there's much more to this, and hopefully you've seen that tonight. And El Paso Punk here, Bobby Welsh articulates it best when she states, quote, "I know a lot of people think that punk rock is just stupid people who cannot play two chords, but that's not true at all. I mean, there were really great discussions about everything about the world, about film. I mean, it was just a whole melange of stuff percolating. And that's exciting to be a part of," unquote. She not only rejects the immediate dismissal of people like her and intimates the level of knowledge and history lost if they continue to be ignored. And the stakes of honoring these history and culture have never been so high than today, but the pressures to erase history and culture are quite old. At the end of the 19th century, Anglo-run newspaper editors praised the erasure of Mexican power and culture from El Paso's landscape. For them, they wrote, quote, "The removal of ancient adobe with all their bad associations means a new life for El Paso," unquote. Nevertheless, a century later, people like these El Paso punks reaffirmed their multiracial, especially Mexican-American identities that developed nuanced and firsthand critiques of violence and inequality to a broader society that dismissed them as just dumb kids. And if we ignore their efforts, what is left out of the culture they created for future generations? However, scholar George Lipsitz gives us a way out, and he explains how Obliterating suppressed memories and desires requires constant vigilance. And further sheds light on how we may never succeed in finding out all that has happened in history, but events matter, and describing them as accurately as possible can, at the very least, show us whose foot has been on whose neck, unquote. Indeed, the memories of these El Paso punks that you've experienced or listened to, heard about today, are not novel pieces of trivia or punk rock points to collect. They're a powerful force against a broader trajectory of sterile and ruthless historical amnesia and erasure. Lipsitz underlines how memory is a terrain of struggle for marginalized groups and how he terms counter-memories are really key tools in this fight against domination. Therefore, when the words, the music, the zines, and possibly even this presentation come to light about these El Paso punks, they are a powerful force of documenting and remembering that is so deeply essential right now. At the beginning of the next century, an awareness of documenting this memory appears in San Antonio-based punk band Fea, so I had to do a shout out to San Antonio, and their song No Hablo Español. And one of the lyrics is, "This is what I remember, my past will not surrender." This lyric's resonance is a powerful reflection of how those punks in El Paso were unrelenting in their commitment to a rebellious sonic tradition against injustice and historic and cultural erasure. Moreover, it sheds light on the powerful way music connects us beyond the present and does not allow us to forget. Thank you. And with my suggestion, if you're interested in buying my book, buy local, either from UT Press, or you can buy it on Bookshop and support a literary bookshop in El Paso, Texas. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation and so eye-opening about how El Paso punk has carried on a long history of punk music really being responsive to current events, politics, and social injustice, etc. Not a perfect, I know we've got all kinds of issues too, but very much in conversation with the moment, right? Yeah, how neat. Okay, we have some questions. Let's see. So we have a question from Melissa. She wants to know if you by chance got to interview Two Edge. She says that as a teenager, she saw them perform in Amarillo, Texas.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. So Two Edge, there were, I would have to say within my book, if you get my book, there were some really key bands that tended to be more of like the first generation. Cedric Bixler-Zavala did this really good interview on the podcast, Once Was a Punk, and he really helps to set it up. Like the 70s were the first wave of punks, like the Plugs, even though they were in Los Angeles, and then Rhythm Pigs, and Two Edge was part of that. So many of those bands were a little bit more difficult to get a hold of. So I mainly talked to people from Soggy Buns and Ed Ivy from the Rhythm Pigs, and then Bobby Welsh was really, well, she produced Teenage Popeyes album, but unfortunately, no. I think there are also other people in El Paso that would like to do that. So that wanted me to talk about that. But my focus, and I leaned into more of my generation, which was the second wave, which is at the drive-in and Revolucion X. So no, unfortunately, but there are a lot of people in El Paso that are interested in that. And I think they just got together. At least last year, I think I was hearing that they were getting together again to play music. So Melissa, I think they might be doing stuff. You might want to check on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but the punks are really active. And I think Two Edge might be doing stuff now. So yeah, it's really great to see how these punks, even without the internet, were able to tour to other places. So yeah, check it out. I think they might be doing stuff, but unfortunately, no, I don't really talk about them that much, but your El Paso punk.
If someone is not really familiar with any of this, how might you define punk?
Oh gosh, that's like
I know, I know.
okay. No, it's a really
And,
good
and not trying to get you in trouble either, right?
No. Well, yeah, like no matter what, like as punk rockers, myself included, we're all kind of like, well, is that right or not right? I would say punk, because I don't even think always punk is a sound. I think it's a way of life.
Mhm.
Um, I I think there are musicians that are punk, like Solange, for instance, who's just like they challenge the status norm and they like shake us awake, and make us aware of what's going on, whether that's culturally or politically or
Mhm.
socially. So Public Enemy is super punk. Even Rick Rubin called them more of a punk band than a hip hop band, but they are rap. Like rap is very punk rock. So for me, it's a way of a state of mind. Although I do like the sounds. Like I love Revolucion X. I love Bikini Kill. I love At the Drive-In. I love Fea, obviously, as you can tell. But all of those bands, at least for me, the through line for all of them is that one, they shake us all awake, but two, for me, out of any community that I feel the most comfortable with, it's the punk community because we're kind of weirdos and outsiders as well. But at least the ideal is that we embrace one
Mhm.
another. Not
Mhm.
perfectly
Mhm.
at all times, but especially in El Paso, I feel very at home with other punks. So that would be my best approximation, and I know others, especially in El Paso, might have even better definitions than I do.
No problem, no problem at all.
Great question.
Another, Meg wants to know, is there a playlist to go along with your book?
Oh, no, I wanted to do one. Well, okay. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to do a shout out for UT Press, where my book was published with. There's a book called Revenge of the She Punks, and they do have a playlist. But unfortunately, like, because I wanted to include that, but I couldn't include that. So I would say look up Jason Skagans. If you do JR and it's spelled, I can go back to that clip. Let's see if I can go back to the clip. If it shows, if you go on JR and it says Kagan, but it's Skagan. He posts a lot of that good music online. So, and he's really a punk archivist, if you will. So I would say check him out. And from there, you'll have the connections to others and others. But off the top of my head, I would absolutely have you listen to Spitch, which relocated to Austin, who Jason was a member of. The Plugs, I would say also obviously At the Drive-In. Um, there's so many, and El Paso. And then there's just if you read my book, there's the longer roots of like Pachuco music
Mhm.
or, like Pachuco Boogie.
Mhm.
And the artist was from El Paso. So Don Toste was from El Paso. So I would say, yeah, looking up, some of it's not really as available on like Spotify or anything.
Right.
So I would say YouTube would be the best way of looking up. So I'd start with Jason because he does the best at all of this.
Okay, that's great.
Oh, and one more, just really fast, one more thing. Actually, there is, if you're into punk, Revolucion X is doing a re-release on this pretty obscure label, Metadona. They're re-releasing their album in, I think, November. So if you are into obscure punk music, look up this online, Metadona, and they're re-releasing Gaspar's albums, Revolucion X's albums.
Wonderful. Okay. And the book, I know it won an academic award, but how has it been received in the punk community?
Yeah, like there's always limits to it. Like I think overall, in particular, I think most importantly, I'll just start with the community of El Paso. is my favorite city, period, even though I'm from New Mexico, has been so very generous. I've been invited so many times, and the events are always so community oriented, where you have people who are older, younger, kids. So the last event that they invited me to do was a huge event that had books and bands and a panel of a couple of us talking about El Paso punk. So I feel that it's been very, the reception has been very positive. That the most important was to El Paso. And I would say for the wider reception outside of El Paso, a lot of young women come up, especially Chicanas come up and appreciate the book, because it was really intentional that I chose Jenny Cisneros, who's on the cover of the book. She was in Spitch. I very much centered women, because I know we've always been in punk music worlds, but oftentimes we're, set aside and placed in obscure footnotes when really we're central to the functioning of any music world. So that has been the most inspiring, where young Chicanas, even from Southern New Mexico, are super stoked about the book. And sometimes the fact that, especially in New Mexico, they're excited that, I'm writing it. So go team for my home state. But yeah, I feel it's been really very positive, and that's what writing can do. What I wanted it to do is to, first of all, challenge our ideas of who punk rockers are, or any youth culture is, and then to change the way women are written into histories of punk rock, because obviously we're always there, but we're wiped away, especially Chicanas. There's just this erasure. So I feel very lucky that there's been a really good reception so far, with being hosted by organizations like yourselves. So yeah, I think it's been very positive.
Wonderful. And what's next?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm
No pressure.
No, I do. No, I am. I've been in discussion with Rutgers University Press, and it's just starting out. I want to do more on El Paso, but I want to look at all of, and I'm sure it's the same in San Antonio. People don't just stay where they are. People reach out, and I find that I'm interested in looking at Mexican American forms of creativity and social movements, all the way from the very edges of, in northern New Mexico, where my family's from, all through El Paso and into Mexico. So really, I want to look at local social movements, and in particular look at culturally creative women, like skateboarders. There's a lot of Chicanas that are skateboarders. So I want to look at that. I want it to be this more of a constellation of how there are these interconnections amongst these different Mexican and Mexican American communities. Yeah, so I just started. I've only done one oral history, so I got a long way to go. But I know I always want to go back to El Paso, and I've been doing a lot of work in my dad's family's hometown of Taos, New Mexico. If you guys know where that is, there's a lot going on there. So yeah, paso a paso, as they say. But yes, I'm excited for the next chapter. But I'm also excited that people continue to be excited about this work.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome. I think Michelle Settles would approve. Skateboarding, yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much to our guest, Tara Lopez, and thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation, we've got more for you. Next month, our MACRI Talk will feature author David Gutierrez about his book on the all-Mexican American Army unit during World War II. From El Paso. I don't know how El Paso got two MACRI Talks in a row, but that'll be on Veterans Day, November 11th, 6 p.m. We'll be live streaming to honor our veterans. And also, if you're in San Antonio, or if you can get to San Antonio, we've got an exhibit up right now that we just opened last weekend, Cisneros versus Corpus Christi ISD. the long fight to end school segregation. And that'll be up through the first day or the day before Thanksgiving. And after that, it's going to go on tour. So maybe it'll come to your town. You can always find out more about what's happening at MACRI on our website, which is at somosmacri.org. And we'd love for you to learn more about us if you don't already know. We are working on building the nation's first Mexican-American Civil Rights History Museum. So go over to the website, you can learn more, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much, Dr. Lopez.
Thank you very much. So nice to meet you.
Yes, good